Right now on NewsNation Live, Russian unrest, how the U.S. is managing the short-lived mercenary mutiny, and how this all will play into the Ukraine war. Plus, what went wrong aboard the doomed Titan, the investigation into the implosion, and questions about who is paying for the massive international search. Plus, the push for high-speed internet in every household. President Biden unveils his new infrastructure push. And no more shot? Weight loss drugs like Ozempic could soon be in pill form. But will they work as well? NewsNation Live starts now. Good morning on this Monday. I'm Nick Smith filling in for Marni Hughes. We begin with the fallout of that short-lived coup attempt in Russia. The implications could have a ripple effect across the international world. Just about everyone was watching to see just how far the rebellion would advance. The man behind the power grab is Yevgeny Prigozhin. We have yet to see or hear from the Wagner Group, and after the deal was negotiated to stop his troops from advancing. We also have yet to see or hear from Vladimir Putin. The Russian leader was last seen Saturday during an early morning address to the country. This was the first real public threat to his power in over 20 years. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it shouldn't have come as a shock to anyone that something like this could have happened. Only this morning are we finally seeing Russia's defense minister, who was nowhere to be seen over the weekend as the chaos unfolded. This video was released by Russia's defense ministry. We have no idea when or where this video was shot. As for what this all means, the rebellion shows deep cracks in Putin's power over Russia and beyond, and highlights in the toll the war in Ukraine is truly taking. For more, our Allison Harris joins us live from the White House. Allison, this uprising is definitely concerning to those on the ground. What do we make of it?
It is certainly dangerous, Nick, and there are so many questions that remain this morning. The uprising against Russian President Putin lasted only 24 hours, but it is being called a devastating failure for President Putin. It's causing chaos in Russia and loosening Putin's grip on power, as you said, for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine 16 months ago. And this morning, there are still a lot of uncertainties about how much the U.S. knew about this rebellion and when the U.S. would have known it. A U.S. official confirming to NewsNation that U.S. intelligence picked up information recently that Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of that mercenary Wagner group, was planning some type of action against the Russian military, but the speed at which he acted surprised intelligence officials. U.S. and Western intelligence agencies saw signs that Wagner was making preparations, including amassing weapons and also ammunition. Prigozhin says the Russian armed forces launched a military missile strike on the Wagner group's rear camps, and he, in turn, vowed to punish them. The revolt ended on Saturday when they struck a deal that was brokered by Belarus. Wagner mercenaries withdrew from the southern Russian city of Rostov, and there are reports that Wagner fighters are still holding on to military installations in Russia, as it remains unknown exactly where that leader Prigozhin is today, although Russia says part of the deal is that he will go to Belarus. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says you could see the tension mounting here. It did not come as a total surprise.
I think you've seen cracks emerge that weren't there before. To the extent that Russia is now distracted, that Putin has to worry about what's going on inside of Russia, I think that creates an additional advantage for the Ukrainians to take advantage of.
And over the weekend, President Biden spoke with allies and partners about the attempted march on Moscow, including leaders from France, Germany, the UK, and Canada. The president also spoke with Ukrainian President Zelensky in a call on Sunday, reaffirming the United States' unwavering support through continued security, economic, and humanitarian aid. Zelensky later tweeted about that call, saying it was positive and inspiring, saying the world must put pressure on Russia until international order is restored. Nick?
Allison, this still has to be something that the White House is watching. Allison Harris, thank you so much. Now to the latest on the investigation into what caused the catastrophic implosion of the Titan submersible last Sunday. Voice recordings from the support ship were recovered and are now being reviewed by the U.S. Coast Guard, who is leading this investigation. This as crews continue to try to recover debris from the ocean floor to get a better understanding of what happened. Our NewsNation's correspondent Xavier Walton joins us now. Xavier, do we know how long this investigation might take? Because we know that these families definitely want answers.
Nick, families want answers, people want answers, no set timetable. But that's something, when you talk about an investigation that needs to be thorough, it's going to take a good bit of time. But right now, crews are continuing to recover debris from the bottom of the ocean, like you just mentioned, from that sub. And that's where it's going to start, right? Tasked with piecing together exactly what happened, when it happened, as part of the Coast Guard's high-level investigation process. Collecting that debris is going to take days. Same with interviews that are going to be conducted by the Coast Guard. Part of the process is also going to be, reviewing voice recordings from the ship that carried the vessel and its 5 passengers who we now know perished.
During the course of the MBI, the board will first and primarily work to determine the cause of this marine casualty and the 5 associated deaths. The MBI, however, is also responsible for accountability aspects of the incident, and it can make recommendations to the proper authorities to pursue civil or criminal sanctions as necessary.
As necessary is correct. And when you think about it, there is no set timetable. This could take weeks, months. They did not say, more so that they're going to be thorough. But when you think about just how long the search and rescue efforts took, and then you think about now where we're at with the recovery efforts, certainly you cannot put a price on lives and the 5 lives that were lost. But people are beginning to ask the question of how much, and then also who is footing the bill. Those are questions certainly circulating now. When you factor in the days and just the amount of help that was given, the resources. According to a report in the New York Times, this is probably going to cost millions of dollars. And when you talk about who's going to be paying, according to the Coast Guard, a matter of Homeland Security policy, the Guard never asks a private company, so in this case that is OceanGate, to reimburse the government for costs associated with search and rescue missions. Now, according to the Department of Defense, the money spent on the expansive search, that was budgeted. But right now, it's hard to think about money. I think more so families are still focused on getting answers as to what happened to their family members, Nick.
And Xavier, I think we can agree, determining what is gleaned from this investigation will also determine how these types of deep sea explorations move going forward. NewsNation correspondent Xavier Walton, thank you. A heartbreaking revelation from the woman who lost both her husband and son aboard the Titan sub. Christine Dawood says she was supposed to go on the sub with her husband, Shahzad Dawood, and her seat was given to her 19-year-old son, Suleiman. She told the BBC that they were originally set to go on an earlier trip, but it was postponed due to the pandemic, and that her son really wanted to go, so she let him take her place. She says she also took along his Rubik's Cube, which he could solve in just 12 seconds, because he wanted to complete it at the bottom of the ocean by the Titanic. Meantime, the White House is set to announce a more than $40 billion investment in high-speed internet access. The president is trying to focus his re-election campaign messaging around the economy, specifically focusing on building up the middle class. Our Tom Dempsey joins us live from Washington with more on what the president is hoping to accomplish by renaming his goal here. Right, Tom?
Yeah, that's right, Nick. Look, as we're getting set for this White House speech happening, expected later this hour, our viewers should expect to hear terms like Bidenomics by President Biden and his campaign team. The president really wants to start picking up some momentum for his reelection campaign, and that could involve really touting some of his policy wins, including on the economy. And we'll see some of that with this announcement today on this $40 billion plan to boost internet access to areas that still need it here in America. As part of this announcement happening later today, the president will also be kicking off his Investment in America tour, as he describes it, giving him a chance to really highlight some of his economic wins in particular. The big infrastructure bill passed by Congress last year included efforts to expand internet access. So with this announcement today, expect the president to talk about his effort to rebuild the economy and help the middle class while trying to show the country remains on the right track. But of note, earlier this month, exclusive polling done by NewsNation and Decision Desk HQ showed less than half of voters who responded somewhat or strongly approved of President Biden's performance. The polling also found that 71% of those who responded responded believed the country to be on the wrong track. Earlier today on NewsNation, though, one of the president's top economic advisors spoke about how he believes President Biden deserves more credit for today's announcement and other decisions. Take a listen.
This is basically doing what FDR did with rural electrification, doing that for broadband, which of course is so essential. Ask people how they feel about getting rid of non-compete clauses, about making things like hearing aids more affordable, about getting rid of junk fees. These are all initiatives that the president has already undertaken.
Again, we expect this speech from President Biden on this internet plan later this hour. But after today, the president will head to Chicago on Wednesday. Again, all to highlight the economy. His team saying it'll be a big economic speech this upcoming Wednesday in Chicago next.
Tom, we know that factory halls and like union town halls are President Biden's happy place, but what can we expect with the Biden campaign over the next few weeks and months when he knows that if 71% are believing that the country is on the wrong track, he has a problem?
I think a positive tone is what you can expect from this campaign. He's going to really highlight, like I said, this internet plan happening today, the infrastructure bill that he, really championed that Congress passed. So I think he's going to really own in on that message as, he took over this tough economy post-COVID and post the pandemic and really tried to help it recover in his own words. I'm sure he's going to say that. So inflation remains far and away the top issue on the minds of voters, at least according to that NewsNation and Decision Desk HQ polling. And 93% of the people who responded to that poll said they remained concerned about the state of inflation. So again, expect the president to really highlight some of these economic wins during his term and to really take more of a positive tone, showing that he has really taken hold of the issue, Nick.
NewsNation correspondent Tom Dempsey live for us this morning at the White House. Tom, thank you. The race for the White House is heating up, at least for one Democrat. Take a look at this. Robert Kennedy Jr. appears to be trying to use his Kennedy looks to get voters to give him a look after this video of him doing push-ups topless went viral. But is it working? Well, the latest Real Clear Politics average shows RFK Jr. trailing 50 points behind President Biden, with some recent polling showing him as much as 60 points behind. Joe Khalil joins us now with more on the uphill battle for Kennedy to try to win the Democratic nomination, one push-up at a time. Hey, Joe.
He's a little bit more jacked than I think a lot of us thought, huh? Look, I mean, he's going to present a bit of a problem right now, a headache at least, for President Biden. I'm not sure how much Democrats are taking RFK seriously at the moment, but again, a bit of a headache. Tom laid it out, right? President Biden hitting the road today. He's talking about his policy achievements and improvements to the economy under his administration. Clearly, his campaign thinks that's going to be a winning message as we get closer to 2024. The other side of that coin, though, for President Biden is he's going to be fighting some major headwinds, and that could make him a vulnerable incumbent, too. We have data now this morning that shows that. A brand new NBC poll showing that concerns about the president's age still persist. You've got 68% of respondents saying that they've got at least some concern about President Biden's mental or physical health at 80 years old here. 55% say it is a major concern. Now, compare that to former President Trump here in the same poll. He had 55% saying some concern, and 44% of respondents said his health and fitness is a major concern. So 10 to 13 points better than President Biden is doing in that category, Nick. That same poll also found 2 in 3 Americans say the country's headed in the wrong direction. We just saw a NewsNation poll that had numbers similar to that. That never bodes well for an incumbent president either. So Biden does lead Trump in most head-to-head polls as of today. His favorables are slightly higher than Trump's, but not by much in both of those categories. Biden's still sitting in the sort of low to mid 40% when it comes to approval. And then when we talk about RFK, again, look, while Democrats aren't exactly getting behind the Robert F. Kennedy train in big numbers, he is registering enough support where the Biden team has to at least be paying attention. Now, it's unclear if President Biden's going to agree to debate RFK. Seems unlikely at this point. We did ask the campaign, and they have just not said anything. But the video you highlighted, right, posting the shirtless workout videos, it got a lot of buzz, as intended, I think, to highlight and contrast his own physical health to that of President Biden's. Clearly, people were paying attention to it. So Biden's team largely has been responding by ignoring RFK Jr. altogether. As the president hits the road, though, today and in the coming weeks, they are going to have to contend at least with the mood of the country and those voters' concerns, Nick.
Absolutely, Joe. And you and I know that President Biden definitely enjoys those town halls and the opportunity to engage with people directly out there. So we'll see what happens. Joe Khalil live for us this morning. Joe, thank you so much. Tune in Wednesday for a live presidential town hall event. Democratic candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. takes questions live at NewsNation headquarters in Chicago. That will be moderated by our own Elizabeth Vargas. Tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern, only on NewsNation. Well, the Port of Miami is back open after a deadly crash led to it being closed for hours on Sunday. A 30 boat sank after colliding with a ferry early on Sunday morning. Now, one person died and another was rushed to the hospital in serious condition. It happened as 3 cruise ships with a total of more than 15,000 people were preparing to dock at the port later in the morning. The U.S. Coast Guard worked throughout the day, saying on social media that they were able to remove the sunken boat and reopen the port in the afternoon, allowing cruise ships and passengers to disembark. Well, happening now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is in the border town of Eagle Pass, Texas. He's there to announce his campaign's border policy. It's also one of the top issues for Republicans. DeSantis is hoping to use this to highlight how he'd be tough on immigration.
I look at the issue of the border, and there's some people in the media, some people on certain political persuasions that just dismiss it as kind of a Texas problem or an Arizona problem. But I'm here to tell you, when you don't have control of your own border, that's an American problem. And it's not just about, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on here. Hopefully we'll hear some stories today. But this impacts communities all throughout this country.
This is DeSantis' first major platform announcement since entering the race last month. Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is now floating the possibility of an impeachment investigation into Attorney General Merrick Garland. The speaker posted this on Twitter, quote, "We need to get to the facts, and that includes reconciling the clear disparities. U.S. Attorney David Weiss must provide answers to the House Judiciary Committee. If the whistleblower's allegations are true, this will be a significant part of a larger impeachment inquiry into Merrick Garland's weaponization of the DOJ." Well, last week, GOP members of the House Ways and Means Committee unveiled testimony from 2 IRS whistleblowers involved in investigating Hunter Biden's taxes. All eyes will be on the Supreme Court tomorrow, as a flurry of decisions are expected to be announced before the end of the month. The court normally goes into recess at the end of June, and justices have given no indication they will break from this norm. Right now, we are waiting consequential decisions on student debt relief, affirmative action, and federal election laws. Well, the House Foreign Affairs Chairman, Republican Michael McCaul, issues a scathing criticism of President Biden's foreign policy. McCaul told Fox News the, quote, "shameful Afghanistan withdrawal helped strengthen China." He believes this happened in part because capable U.S. intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, left Afghanistan, and those agents have been responsible for surveilling Russia, China, and Iran. Meantime, a report by the Biden administration released in April laid the blame at the feet of President Trump for the chaotic withdrawal. And the report says President Biden was severely constrained by Trump's decisions. Now to Southern California, where human remains have been found near where British actor Julian Sands was last seen. The 65-year-old vanished on January 13th while hiking in the San Gabriel Mountains. Those are north of Los Angeles. Now, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department says an ID on the remains should be made sometime this week.
Every time the radical left, Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it a great badge of honor and a badge of courage.
Well, still ahead, the race for the 2024 campaign heating up with Trump rallying support over the weekend amid his indictment. Plus, the race is on for the first safe and effective weight loss pill. That's the leading drug maker is taking. And brand new comments from the leader of the Wagner Group the real reason he ended the revolt that's raising questions about Putin's strength as a leader. All that and more when NewsNation Live continues.
Itch, itch, scratch, must not itch.
Stop the itch sanity with Cortisone 10 for bug bites, poison ivy, and other itches. Cortisone 10 is #1 doctor recommended. It works fast and lasts for hours. Cortisone 10.
We need some help.
I know. I'm going to CashNetUSA.com, and if approved, we can have the money in our account as soon as the same business day.
Go to CashNetUSA.com to apply for the money you need.
My most important kitchen tool, my brain. So I choose Nariva Plus. Unlike some others, Nariva Plus is a multitasker supporting 6 key indicators of brain health to help keep me sharp. Nariva, think bigger.
What do you guys think came first, the chicken or the baby back rib?
Baby back ribs.
Yeah. Chicken tenders all the way.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby
chicken.
back
chicken.
ribs.
Chicken.
Baby back.
Chicken tenders.
On second thought, it really depends which side of the buffet you start on.
I used to wait to run my dishwasher till it was super full. Now, I dish differently. I run it daily. Weekdays. Weekends. Sometimes after a big snack. You might think that's wasteful, but it's not. Because even half loads use 80% less water than hand washing, saving up to $130 a year on utilities. And with Cascade Platinum Plus, you just scrape, load, done. So next time you're waiting to run it, just run it. Dare to dish differently.
Today, there are more identity threats than you realize. And only one has to sneak by. LifeLock alerts you to threats you could miss. If your identity is stolen, a dedicated restoration specialist will help fix it. Backed by our $1 million protection package. LifeLock. Identity theft protection starts here.
After switching to the farmer's dog, we noticed so many improvements in Remy's health. His allergies were going away, and he just had amazing energy.
It looks like nutritious food, and it is.
I'm investing in my dog's health and happiness.
Get started at longlivedogs.com.
I never want my busy lifestyle to get in the way of us eating well. I know a lot of people can relate. At Hungry, we do the work for you. That's why we offer healthy groceries and simple recipes to help you feel your best.
Arthritis pain? We say, not today. Tylenol 8-Hour Arthritis Pain has 2 layers of relief. The first is fast. The second is long-lasting. We give you your day back so you can give it everything. Tylenol, #1 doctor recommended for arthritis pain.
Welcome back. Breaking news, newly released audio from the head of the Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, providing insight into this weekend's aborted mutiny in Russia. He says, quote, "We started our march because of an injustice." He also said the march was a protest and not intended to overthrow power in Russia. But he didn't reveal any of the group's future plans. Joining me now with more on this is former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, now Vice President for Europe and Russia at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Thank you so much for joining me.
Glad to be here.
We watched the events unfurl over the weekend. What do you make of these comments now that we're hearing from Prigozhin?
So Prigozhin, not a hero. Putin, not a hero. These two non-heroes blinked this weekend. Both were on a collision course. Prigozhin says now it was just a protest. Well, it was more than a protest, clearly. He had a bunch of troops headed toward Moscow, shooting down Russian army helicopters, killing 12 to 20 Russian soldiers, pilots. So this is a little more than a protest. And in the beginning of the day on Saturday, you had President Putin saying that this was treason, that he was going to smash Prigozhin. And by the end of the day, he was going to give him a free pass to go to Belarus. So this was a conflict, a clash between two thugs, and both blinked.
And now that Prigozhin is safely, reportedly, in transport to Belarus, I have to ask you, though, what does this mean for Vladimir Putin? Is this another chink in the armor, or is this an opportunity for Vladimir Putin to once again display his strength and saying, you know what, anybody comes after me, I'm still able to shoot it down?
Hard to see anything of strength in Putin's performance this weekend. Putin created Prigozhin, gave him resources, gave him access to prisoners in Russian jails to recruit into the Wagner group. So Putin, another blunder, another bad decision, big decision, of course, bad decision to invade Ukraine in the first place, but then another terrible decision to allow this private military company to gain so much power that could then turn against him. It's out of his control. So Putin does not look strong. The Ukrainians, by contrast, look stronger than ever. They are ready to counter the Russian invasion into their country. The Ukrainians are ready to push the Russians out of their country.
Mr. Taylor, since we know that everything about Mr. Putin is about perception and this display of strength, could we see more challenges to his authority behind this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've already seen a couple. You all reported a couple of weeks ago that there were these two different Russian forces, military forces that came out of Ukraine. These are Russian people, Russian soldiers who are opposed to Putin. They were training in Ukraine, and they are attacked into Russia around Belgorod. So it's not just Prigozhin, it's not just Wagner. There are a lot of people apparently in Russia who don't want to see Putin as their president. So this is a bad sign for President Putin.
We heard from the White House issue their show of continued support to Ukrainian President Zelensky. We saw Mr. Zelensky talk about that he accepts that support. And will this affect the war in Ukraine? And what does it do for their morale?
It boosts their morale. You're exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, the Ukrainians are watching the disarray in the Kremlin. They're watching the disarray in the military chain of command in the Russian forces. This has got to have an effect on the Russian soldiers' morale going down, and it clearly boosts the Ukrainian soldiers' morale going up. So this is clearly a benefit to the Ukrainians, and they are very likely to take advantage.
You know, Mr. Taylor, I think about how, 16 months ago, we were just talking about how Russia was taking over southern parts of Ukraine and how aggressive Putin was being. And we're seeing a very different shift in things now. We know that there's no way that Vladimir Putin would ever just leave office or step down or anything like that. But what do you think happens now? Is all of this in effect because Mr. Putin was not able to conquer Ukraine as quickly as he had indicated that he would be able to?
You're exactly right. When dictators fail and when they make bad decisions and when they lose confidence of people around them, maybe even confidence of the Russian people, when that happens, they lose power one way or the other. They may be Mr. Putin may be shown the door, maybe headed off to a dacha somewhere with his family taken care of, or worse. The point is, he has been shown this weekend what many people knew was that his power, his control is pretty fragile.
I know that your expertise is in this area, but I have to ask you, when the Wagner troops have now been ordered back to Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine, are they just going back and pretending this revolt didn't happen, or will there be repercussions for those who actually did follow Prigozhin?
It's a great question. It's a great question. The Wagner troops seem to be divided into two as far as the Russian military is concerned. That one part of the Wagner group are the ones that actually participated in this insurrection. And they were in the convoy that was heading for Moscow, armed, that shot down some Russian military aircraft and killed some Russian soldiers. Those people, those members of the Wagner group, not clear. They say they're not going to be prosecuted, but you got to worry about those. There are other parts, the people in the Wagner organization that did not participate in this insurrection will be welcome to sign contracts with the Russian military. It's not clear that these Wagner troops will be interested in signing a contract with the Russian military. Prigozhin treats his people pretty well, pays them pretty well. The Russian military doesn't. So it's very likely that the Wagner troops will that Wagner in general will disappear as an organized military operation. And in all of this, Vladimir Putin still needs their expertise and those boots on the ground, correct? He does. He does. So the Russians are trying to defend 600 miles of front line in Ukraine. And the Russians have just lost some of their crack troops. The Wagner troops were the only ones to have any success on the battlefield. Even that was at 8 months. It took an incredibly long time just to take a small town, Bakhmut. But nonetheless, they were able to finally take that town, and no other troops could do that. So yes, the Russian forces facing the Ukrainians are now weaker. Hey, wow, William Taylor, thank you so much. I really appreciate you leaning in with your expertise on that. And I have every reason to believe you and I will have more information later this week about what actually happened and have an opportunity to discuss it further. Thank you so much. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Have a good day. Up next, a revolutionary new drug that could be a game changer in the fight against Alzheimer's. Keep it right here on NewsNation Live. We'll be right back after the break.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in a live town hall event Wednesday at 9, 8 Central on NewsNation.
When a cyber thief transfers the title of your home out of your name, it's a race against time to stop the theft of your hard-earned equity.
Many people don't know this has happened until long after it's done.
You as the homeowner think you still own a house. 3 months later, you start getting foreclosure notices and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house that you didn't even know existed.
So when's the last time you checked on the title to your home? Find out if you're already a victim at HomeTitleLock.com.
My most important kitchen tool? My brain. So I choose Neriva Plus. Unlike some others, Neriva Plus is a multitasker supporting 6 key indicators of brain health to help keep me sharp. Neriva, think bigger.
With thyroid eye disease, I hid from the camera, and I wanted to hide from the world. For years, I thought my TED was beyond help. But then, I asked my doctor about Tepezza.
Tepezza is the only medicine that treats TED at the source, not just the symptoms. In a clinical study, more than 8 out of 10 patients taking Tepezza had less eye bulging. Tepezza is an infusion. Patients taking Tepezza may have infusion reactions. Tell your doctor right away if you experience high blood pressure, fast heartbeat, shortness of breath, or muscle pain. Before getting Tepezza, tell your doctor if you have diabetes, IBD, or are pregnant or planning to become pregnant. Tepezza may raise blood sugar even if you don't have diabetes and may worsen IBD such as Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis.
Now, I'm ready to be seen again.
Visit mytepezza.com to find a TED eye specialist and to see Bridget's before and after photos.
I want to enjoy my free time and not worry about expensive home repairs. So my friend recommended 210 Home Buyer's Warranty.
We researched 210 online and they had great reviews. It was easy to get started.
They cover the entire house: cooling, heating, plumbing, and appliances.
And it doesn't matter how old they are either.
With 210, we are free from the hassle of huge repair bills.
Protect more, pay less with 210 Home Buyer's Warranty. Call 855-210-4290 or visit 2-10.com today.
What do you guys think came first, the chicken or the baby back rib?
Baby back ribs.
Yep. Chicken tenders all the way.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby
chicken.
back
chicken.
ribs.
Chicken.
Baby back.
Chicken tenders.
I'm gonna go get some pie.
Guys, got hair loss? I know what you're thinking. Should I shave my head? Comb it over? Wear a hat? Just stop. This isn't 1970. Keep your hair and your confidence because Bosley, America's #1 hair restoration experts, can give you your real hair back permanently. Check them out because they're giving away an absolutely free information kit and a free gift card to everyone who scans this QR code. Dude, you don't have to look like your dad because this isn't your dad's hair loss treatment. People all over the country trust Bosley because they're ahead of the curve. They use the latest technology to give you your real hair back. And the best part, Bosley's permanent solution is protected by the Bosley Guarantee. Let them show you for free how awesome your hair could look with an absolutely free information kit and a gift card for $250 off. Scan the QR code. Don't wait. Scan the code now and ask about the Bosley Guarantee.
Welcome back to NewsNation Live. It's a race against time for drug makers as they compete to be the first to have an effective version of a weight loss pill. The New England Journal of Medicine recently published a study on Eli Lilly's drug, orforglipron. Now, the preliminary research suggests that the oral method rivals currently approved injectable therapies. The drug is being tested longer to assess its full efficacy, but unlike currently approved medicines for weight loss like Ozempic and Wegovy, orforglipron is a daily pill, not a once-weekly injection. On Sunday, pharmaceutical company Novo Nordisk also shared similar findings regarding their oral version of the medication. Joining me to talk more about this is Dr. Steven Stites, Chief Medical Officer at the University of Kansas Health System. Dr. Stites, I have to jump right in there because you and I both know so many people are looking for that magic pill. What do you make of this possible version of these types of medications being in pill form and making it easier for people to maybe get the health effects that they're looking for?
This is really good news. We got a long ways to go from this news to actually having a pill that'll be able for somebody to take on a regular basis, but it's clearly a step forward. Obesity is one of the largest healthcare crises we face in America. So anything we can do to help with that is great. And I think an oral pill will be just one of the best tools we could have. You know, the injectables work great, right? And they were never intended for this purpose, but it turned out that they worked as they were also treating diabetes and has significant impact on weight loss. Having an oral pill that can even come close to that would be really a great step forward.
And again, we don't even know the long-term effects of the injectables just yet. And so that would also take time with the pill. But once the pill clears the necessary hurdles, which method do you think would be the most favorable amongst those who actually use the drug?
You know, that's a great question. A couple of quick thoughts. First, you're gonna have to weigh the side effects too, right? We don't know the side effects of the pill. We have a better understanding on the long-term impact of Ozempic, and we know that as long as you're using the injectables, you continue to keep the weight off. You could see lots of different strategies emerging. Let's say you achieve more significant weight loss with the injectables. You may start with that and then transition to a pill to try and keep it off. Or you may just decide, I don't want to do the injectables because I don't really like the idea of feeling like I have a bee sting every day, so I'll just take the pill. It's very simple. Others may say, man, just injecting it once a week, that's a pretty sweet deal. I don't have to think about taking a pill every day. So I think we'll just have to see how this information plays out. First, what's the most efficacious? Second, what's the role both short and long term? Third, what are the side effects that could be out there? And finally, fourth, what's the cost? And how much will I, as a consumer, having to pay for part of my health care, have to pay for to have these medications?
And if insurance will cover one of those and not the other, you better believe that people will be leaning on their insurance plan to try to cover cost of one of those drugs. Let me switch topics here for you, though. Another big health topic that we've been discussing here in the newsroom is that research has found that an alternative to statins could help reduce heart disease death among people with high levels of LDL or bad cholesterol. Now, the alternative is called bemodic acid. What is that? And when taken daily as a pill, how does it lower the bad cholesterol?
You know, what it does is it works in a similar fashion in some ways as far as cholesterol, because it's going to lower both cholesterol and LDL, which is really a great outcome. What we're hoping is bemodic acid may not have the same list of side effects that the statins do. The statins are the gold standard. They do a great job. Many people can't tolerate them. I tried like 10,000 different statins. I could never tolerate one of them. So trying to find one that people will tolerate without the side effects is really going to be a big deal. So I think bemodic acid may be a good step forward. Whether or not it has the same long-term impact will take years of study to do. I think that the drug is off to a good start, though. We'll see how that
You've talked about even your own level of discomfort, and you and I both know, we know people in our own lives who are hesitant to take the drug. What do you have to say to those who are on the fence about cholesterol-lowering medication in general?
Well, you know, there are some injectables that work really well in addition. They're more expensive. And again, you have to do an injection every 2 weeks or once a month. So the injectables can be pretty effective, but having another pill would be a great alternative. It's still a ways off. The other challenge you face in the meantime is work with your primary care doctor. If you don't tolerate statins, and there are a lot of reasons not to, if you don't tolerate them, then try some of the injectables perhaps, if that's what your primary care doctor or your heart doctor is recommending. And then if that doesn't sound right, then you could try some of these new pills as they come available.
Dr. Stites, I have less than a minute left, but I have to ask you, the FDA is expected to issue a full approval for the first drug shown to slow down Alzheimer's disease. Now, the move would make Lebinqui available to more than 1 million Medicare patients in the early stages of Alzheimer's. There are concerns that the drug's rollout could be impacted by factors ranging from everything from the extra paperwork required of doctors to actually get it going and a shortage of the medication itself. Still, FDA approval is expected by July 6th. Is this a great move?
I think it is a good move. You know, if you think about it, it looks like it stalls or plateaus or tries to regress a little for 6 months, the progression of Alzheimer's. That sounds hauntingly familiar to chemotherapy, which for a long time, it maybe had added 4 months or 6 months to your life, but it wasn't really a cure. This drug is a step in a journey toward treating one of the greatest healthcare crises we face with Alzheimer's disease. So I think it's an important step. It's not going to be a panacea, but it is opening a door to a whole new line of thought of how we're going to treat this difficult disease.
And a disease that we keep seeing plaguing loved ones and family members across the country. Dr. Stites, thank you so much.
Indeed.
Chief Medical Officer at the University of Kansas
Thank you.
Health. Former President Trump rallying support for his 2024 presidential run, calling it a righteous crusade. Up next, I'll speak with our political panel about the next steps in his legal battle and how voters really feel about his indictment. You're watching NewsNation Live.
What do you guys think came first, the chicken or the baby back rib?
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders all the way.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby back ribs.
Chicken tenders.
Baby
Chicken.
back
Chicken.
ribs.
Chicken.
Baby back.
Chicken tenders.
On second thought, it really depends which side of the buffet you start on.
The right age for Neutrogena retinol?
That's whenever you want it to be.
It has derm-proven retinol
That targets vital cell turnover, even skin tone,
and smooths fine lines with visible results in just 1 week. Neutrogena retinol.
Our heritage is ingrained in our skin. And even when we metamorphosize into our new, evolved form, we carry that spirit with us. Because you can take Alfa Romeo out of Italy, but you best believe you can't take the Italy out of an Alfa Romeo.
We live our lives on our home's fabrics, and though we come and go, our odors stay. It's called odor transfer. Left untreated, those odors get trapped inside fabrics and then release smells into your air. Ew. You need new Febreze Fabric Refresher. Its new formula is proven to deliver longer-lasting odor-fighting power so you can enjoy longer-lasting freshness, even hours after spraying. The more everyone sprays, the fresher your whole home stays. New Febreze Fabric Refresher.
At Long John Silver's, our $6 shrimp baskets will save you from the sea of sandwich sameness. Whether they're fried to golden perfection or sizzling on a grill, our $6 shrimp baskets will have you hooked. Order online at longjohnsilvers.com. This year.
There are more ways than ever for identity thieves to steal your information. LifeLock alerts you and works to fix problems with a dedicated restoration specialist. Go to lifelock.com.
Attention firefighters, first responders, military base personnel, and airport workers. Listen closely to this important legal announcement. Have you been exposed to chemical-based firefighting foam? If so, you may be entitled to a substantial cash award without going to court. For decades, aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF, has been used to extinguish liquid fuel fires. A scientific study has now shown that the chemicals used to make AFFF are highly toxic to humans and can cause a significant risk of developing several types of cancer, including kidney, pancreatic, thyroid, prostate, bladder, testicular, liver, or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. If you or a loved one are a firefighter, first responder, airport worker, or member of the military that has used firefighting foam and has been diagnosed with cancer, please call the Negligence Network to file your claim today. There's no fee unless we win your case. Call the Negligence Network to see if you're eligible for substantial compensation. Call 1-800-500-1636. That's 1-800-500-1636.
Welcome back to NewsNation Live. Special Counsel Jack Smith is requesting that former President Donald Trump's federal trial begin on December 11th. His attorneys are expected to consent to that. Now, a campaign stop in Oakland County, Michigan on Sunday, Trump slammed the indictment, saying the only reason the Justice Department is going after him is because he's doing so well in the polls.
Every time the radical left, Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it a great badge of honor and a badge of courage.
I want to bring in my panel, Republican strategist and radio host Malik Abdul and Scott Bolden, legal analyst and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Gentlemen, good morning. Malik, I want to start with you. The Justice Department wants a December 11th federal trial for former President Donald Trump. How likely is that to actually happen?
Well, from what I understand, I'm not the attorney on the panel. My good friend Scott definitely is. But from what I understand, there will be a number of motions, pretrial motions that would have to take place between now and then. If you listen to some of the constitutional experts or legal experts like a Jonathan Turley or otherwise, what they're saying is that there will be a number of back and forth. There will be issues over the classification, over some of the documents, whether or not, for instance, the map that Donald Trump had allegedly shown, whether or not that's something that could actually be introduced in evidence, considering that the government itself says that that's classified information. So I'm not exactly sure if we'll meet that December date, but keep in mind, if that trial actually does start in December, it will be either the late part of January or the earlier part of February when we'll be having our first vote, which would be in the Iowa caucus. So we'll see. But from what I understand, it doesn't seem likely that that December date will stick.
Making it tough, you agreed to get this wrapped up before the 2024 election?
Oh, well, absolutely. And I haven't heard anyone who believes that it will actually be wrapped up before then. Whether or not it will, I'm not sure. But this definitely, all of these indictments, all of these legal issues that Donald Trump has complicates it for him in the general election, although it doesn't seem as if at this point that there will be any issue with Donald Trump winning the GOP primary because he's running away in polling and otherwise. So we'll see what happens. But this definitely doesn't present great news for Donald Trump, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to be pushed back, at least from what I understand, even past the election.
And Malik, before I jump over to Scott, one more question. We're hearing some pushback over this GOP loyalty pledge, and it says that all candidates will need to support eventual candidate down the road. Will Hurd is the most recent refusing to sign it. Chris Christie calling it a useless idea. What do you think about that whole loyalty pledge?
I believe you said Will whom? Was that Hurd? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, Will Hurd is another one who's actually in the race. I don't think that this is going to matter at all. Now, I do understand why the RNC is trying to actually get them to sign this pledge. Keep in mind, if Donald Trump were in a different position, probably being behind in the polls, people would want Donald Trump to sign the pledge that he would he would vote for the eventual nominee. Whether or not they do it, there's nothing that the RNC itself can do, even if they decide to sign the pledge. It's nothing that they could do because at the end of the day, the voters choose who the nominee is. But sure, go ahead and sign the pledge, but it seems as if with Christie and maybe even DeSantis, they're waffling on the idea that they're not going to vote for the eventual nominee. And I do think that that is a problem, articulating that you will not vote for the nominee of your own party. That is a problem.
Yeah, Scott, do you see that being the only problem that the GOP has, or what are you thinking with this loyalty pledge? Because it seems that Mr. Hurd and Mr. Christie are really the only two candidates that we've seen take direct attacks at the former president.
Well, the two people taking the direct attacks, I'm a former state party chair for the Democrats. There's not a whole lot of there's not a whole lot of enforcement GOP can do, especially if Hurd or Christie are the Republican nominees. But here's a news flash. Neither one are going to be the GOP nominee. It may not be Donald Trump either, but it won't be those two just based on polling and money and what have you. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue. The bigger issue is who the nominee is going to be and whether it's going to be Donald Trump. These trials are real. The criminal justice system doesn't really care about the political calendar. And while he may be politically popular, he's under indictment at a state level and at a federal level. And judges, federal and state, really don't care about campaign schedules and primaries. There are two things going on from a timing standpoint with the federal prosecutors and the defense. If I'm a defense attorney, do I want to hurry up and get to trial? I may not be completely prepared, but to put this behind me because I think I can win, and then I go win the GOP nomination. Or do I try to delay it? It's good political rhetoric for me to wear this as a badge of honor. And then once I get the nomination, that puts pressure on the feds and the federal government. What do I do? When do I prosecute? How do I prosecute? And if he's convicted, what happens? But more importantly, if he gets more popular and more popular, how do I pick a jury that's going to keep their political views out of the courtroom? That's going to be real tough. My betting odds are these trials are going to take place either before or during the primaries, if you will, and we'll see what the juries do, both in New York and or New York. Remember, Atlanta is still coming in August or September, so we're in uncharted territory, politically and otherwise.
Malik and Scott, before I let you both go, I've got you both up on the screen. Do you think the secret to President Biden actually gaining in the polls is to drop and do shirtless push-ups?
Biden can't even stay up on a bike, so I don't think that we should be looking for him with that.
Republican strategist and radio host Malik Abdul and legal analyst.
I'm 60, I fall off bikes too. Give me a break.
And former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me this morning. Scott Bowles. Thank you, guys. Tune in Wednesday for a live presidential town hall event. Democratic candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. takes questions live at NewsNation headquarters here in Chicago. That will be moderated by our own Elizabeth Vargas. Tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern only on NewsNation. Well, still ahead, we are currently awaiting an announcement from the White House on President Biden's plan to expand high-speed internet access in the U.S. We'll bring that to you live as it happens. We'll be right back after the break.